Our nation's first vice president, John Adams, called the office that he occupied the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived. FDR's first vice president, John Nance Garner, had the same contempt for his office, saying it was nothing more than a warm bucket of spit. He actually used another bodily fluid, but we'll let that go for now. Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Bitzer. I'm an associate professor of politics and history here at Catawba College, and I'd like to chat about the upcoming announcement of Mitt Romney's running mate and vice presidential candidate, as well as give some background and his history to the office that is literally a heartbeat away from the modern presidency. Now, the Founding Fathers designed the vice presidency as a hybrid between both the executive and legislative branches, with the power to succeed the president in the event of his death or resignation or incapacity, along with presiding over the U.S. Senate and breaking ties. And our first vice president, Vice President Adams, broke the most ties, 29, in the Senate of any vice president. But with the advent of political parties and the bitter campaign between Adams and Jefferson in 1796, the Congress made changes to the Constitution that weakened the office. Along with the changes, it was the party leaders and not presidential candidates who picked vice presidents, oftentimes to the dismay of the presidential candidates. This is typically where you got the pairings such as North and South within the party due to different factions. And so it was really a kind of piecing together of an effective campaign and team that the political parties would put forth for their presidential nominees. The first instance of a vice president ascending to the top position was with the short-lived administration of William Henry Harrison. After serving only a month, Harrison's death brought his vice president, John Tyler, to the presidency. Now, many believed that Tyler was simply an acting president, but he believed that he was indeed the president and demanded the salary of the presidency, and so the country accepted him as the president. The next two vice presidents who would rise to the presidency, Millard Fillmore and Andrew Johnson, also followed the Tyler precedent. One problem, though, with the vice presidency taking over the presidency was due to the incapacity section of the Constitution. Nobody had defined what that meant, and when President James Garfield was shot and laid in bed for months, his vice president, Chester Arthur, was not sure he could step in legitimately into the presidency. This also played a role when Woodrow Wilson suffered a series of strokes near the end of his second term, and his vice president, Thomas Marshall, refused to step in as well. It was basically left up to Wilson's wife to run the country. Most scholars contend that the true modern vice presidency begins with Teddy Roosevelt coming into office after McKinley's assassination in 1901. Roosevelt was later nominated by his political party, the Republicans, after serving for 3 years in office, and he was elected to a full term in office on his own. The second Roosevelt, FDR, broadened the general areas of responsibility for his vice presidents as well. But ironically, FDR kept his last vice president, Harry Truman, in the dark about the plans for World War II as well as his own health. When Roosevelt died 3 months into his fourth term, Truman was basically taking over without any experience or knowledge about how things were going. So what we've seen in just over the past 100 years is that presidents oftentimes die in office. Warren G. Harding, FDR, presidents assassinated, JFK, presidents with severe illnesses, Wilson, Eisenhower, even Reagan. We had Nixon's resignation and even Bill Clinton's impeachment. And so the role of the vice president has become more and more profound and important in our modern society. But the vice presidency really expanded when Jimmy Carter in 1976 conducted the first official search for his vice president, who would later be Walter Mondale. Based on a very close relationship and a belief that the vice president should be more influential, Mondale was the first vice president to have an office in the West Wing and would serve as a very close advisor to Carter. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan sought the Republican nomination, he faced a very competitive primary battle with George H.W. Bush, who derisively called Reagan's economic policies voodoo economics. But Reagan knew that Bush had significant foreign policy experience, having been CIA director as well as ambassador to China. So he eventually put Bush on the ticket as the vice president. Now, in 1988, when George H.W. Bush was running for his election, his vice presidential candidate, Dan Quayle, may have had an impact negatively on his election bid. In fact, some studies look at Quayle having reduced Bush's margin of victory anywhere from 4 to potentially 8 points in 1988. But Bush still won, but faced re-election in 1992 due to a Southern team of Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And Al Gore's vice presidency continued the power and the expansion started under Mondale, and it grew even more when George W. Bush became president with his vice president, Dick Cheney. Now, in selecting vice presidents, modern presidential candidates tend to look at a couple of key things: experience, ability, the political capability for the job, but most importantly, the number one rule for vice presidential candidates: do no harm. One of the big issues that Mitt Romney continually hits on is his criticism of President Obama before becoming president, due to the fact that he had never run anything before, being a businessman. So Romney's top-tier considerations are probably going to be people that have either served in public office or been well engaged in some kind of activity for some time. Typically, the top-tier candidates tend to be right now former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, current U.S. Senator Rob Portman from Ohio, who served both as George W. Bush's trade representative as well as budget director, two-term Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, even Wisconsin Representative Paul Ryan. Some of the wild cards may be Virginia's Governor Bob McDonnell or New Mexico's Governor Susana Martinez. But whoever Romney picks, he's basically going to be fulfilling the job of being the bulldog or the fight dog in the relationship between the presidency and running for the office. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks what Mitt Romney decides are the most important factors and who he names as his vice presidential candidate. Then we can truly get the general campaign off and running. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to post some more videos in the near future. Take care.